Hi guys. I wanted to share some thoughts I had with you on developing a thesis using the examples from the, not student examples, but examples from the DBQ you just finished. And this particular video is part one, developing a thesis. I'm not sure there'll be a part two, but there were significant issues throughout classes on developing a thesis in response to this question, which you know now well probably. Analyze the relative significance of the various causes of the Civil War in the period 1830 to 1860. First of all, two absolute essentials for writing a thesis, regardless of LEQ or DBQ. You must have well-constructed, well-thought-out, well-developed categories. You must also have, if the question asks, you must use relative significance in your thesis. And that means relative significance among the reasons you have chosen. Not, this was important, but here are my reasons, which were more important. No, it's among the three reasons among your categories. Let's look at an example here. Well, first of all, why is it so important? And I know I said this to many people in the Flipgrid videos, but well-constructed categories are essential because you, the student, the writer, you're going to draw on them for your topic sentences and the arguments that flow from those topic sentences, right? You argue your case within a body paragraph. That body paragraph, each body paragraph has a topic sentence, which is essentially an argument or a claim, right? Here are some examples, not exhaustive, not by any means, some examples of well-constructed categories that would have worked for this DBQ. Rise of anti-slavery abolitionist movements. Territorial expansion, opening the question of slavery again. African American and Northern activism. Federalism, that continuing balance of power between the federal government versus the power of the states. It's a little separately here, it's not exactly the same thing, but the power of the federal government to deal with slavery, that could easily have been a category on its own. Constitutional and court issues. Economic differences, you couldn't leave it just at that, although some did. But what is the issue there? Why is that an important reason? Because it led to the lower status of the South, and that created problems, as you know. So let me address a few categories that did not work for this DBQ. And I'll say why. Here are a few. Slavery, nullification, Kansas-Nebraska Act. First of all, for nullification in Kansas-Nebraska Act was used quite a bit. It doesn't work. It's a piece of evidence. It's an event. It's a historical event, an act. You never want that in your thesis. I'm pretty sure we've said this more than once, but avoid that. Nullification, perhaps if the person or persons could have said why nullification, but simply, for example, nullification, comma, Kansas-Nebraska Act, comma, and something else, that's never going to be good enough. Because you have to ask yourself, what am I going to take out of this category for my topic sentences and my arguments below? What about the Kansas-Nebraska Act was important? Like, what was it about that? What did that demonstrate? What did it show? What did it reflect? That's what you have to be thinking of, not an event itself. Slavery. A lot of people wanted to talk about slavery. And this one in particular is so broad, it's not useful to you when you go to begin writing the body of the essay. And the reason is you haven't said what it is about slavery that caused problems, that led to, or helped lead to, the Civil War. You haven't said, although certainly one could make an argument slavery was the permeated society and government churches, and so on, associations, groups, volunteers, reform societies, etc., etc. That could be contextualization. But slavery, using slavery as a category is not helpful. There would be 100 things you could throw in, and then you end up describing why slavery was a problem and not creating arguments about it. So remember, again, this is about the categories. Remember that you will extend your categories into topic sentences, which are always arguments or claims. And as I think I just mentioned, if your topic sentences are not arguments or claims, you will have nothing to prove in your body paragraphs. Having something to prove forces you to develop further arguments. Having nothing to prove can and often does lead to a lot of description but little analysis. So it won't get several points right off the bat if there aren't topic sentences that are actual argument or claims. Where do you get them? You draw them from your categories. The other piece in the thesis for this question was addressing relative significance. You had to address it because the question asked you to. And in this case, it kind of set you up nicely because addressing relative significance will help lead you to complexity and getting the complexity point. It's considered like nuanced. These were important, however, this was most important. Of what? Of the reasons you chose. Here's an example of a thesis with relative significance correctly indicated. I'll just read it. There is no doubt that territorial expansion. Why territorial expansion? Well, they'll go on to say, which reopened the question of the extension of slavery in the West. One category. And the almost colonial status of the South. Two categories. That would be enough, but the student adds, due to its cash crop economy, helped cause the Civil War. However, the grassroots activism of African Americans, including abolitionism in the North and revolts against the slave system in the South, was the greatest factor in causing the war, the greatest factor. So now I've just highlighted those two things. That is answering or addressing the question of relative significance. These two things, right? You have to say that how they led to the other things or helped cause the Civil War. But you also have to address this relative significance. And I know we've said this before, so I am really, truly expecting that next time you guys will have gotten the idea of and can apply it, relative significance. However, the grassroots activism of African Americans, including abolitionism in the North and revolts against the slave system in the South, was the greatest factor in causing the Civil War. Thank you for listening.